Welcome to session 5 of our study through 1 Thessalonians, where we're learning to revive and restart our lives, our churches, maybe even a nation. Now, I recognize that we're talking about all of this in the context of a world that really hasn't existed before. My little grandson, he's 7 now. When he was, I believe, 5, he developed an interest in astronomy, and he would sit with me and just tell me more about planets that I knew myself. And one day he went through all the planets, telling me all these facts and figures, and he finished, and I said, "Well, William, you didn't cover Earth. That's a planet too." And he said, "Oh, I know, Papa John. That's where I live with my mommy and daddy and keep all my stuff." I said, "Well, this is true." But then he said, "Papa John, I've been meaning to ask you, what planet are you from anyway?" And I've been trying to figure that out these days. It seems like this planet has changed so much, it's hard to recognize. And nothing on this planet at any time, in time of crisis and time of blessing, nothing is more important than the Church of Jesus Christ. It's His only plan to bring the gospel to the world, and the gospel is everything. And so nothing matters more than for churches to revive and restart. Not just reopen, but restart after this time where most churches had to shut their physical doors for months. I think we have a very unique chance to see churches become what they're meant to be, not what they were. Listen, revival in real crisis requires real community. Let me say that again. Revival in real crisis requires real community. That's been a weakness in most churches up to now. Some churches have had fairly strong community for those that have attended a long time, but very difficult for those that were new to break into. Other churches are based more on just a big crowd and don't really have community at all, but that's just not a picture of the New Testament church. The New Testament church is an unstoppable community of love and mission. I want to say that again too, because I want to be sure if you're a follower of Jesus, then you have to be concerned about the church in this nation restarting in revival-centric ways, in New Testament ways. So we have to know what we're going after. We're going after an unstoppable community of love and mission. Let's take a look at it. We're going to start with 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 17. "But since we were torn away from you, brothers," Paul says, "for a short time, in person, not in heart, we endeavored the more eagerly and with great desire to see you face to face, because we wanted to come to you, I, Paul, again and again, but Satan hindered us. For what is our hope or joy or crown of boasting before our Lord Jesus at His coming? Is it not you? For you are our glory and our joy." I don't want you to be surprised or even dismayed that many, I hope not, but maybe most churches are going away in the next years ahead. Those that last will start smaller. They have started smaller. Those churches that have reopened are already starting smaller. Before COVID, we were already seeing many churches close every week, week after week. And churches closing every year number in the thousands. Now with COVID, we're going to see many more churches that just won't make it. So how does your church restart, revived and alive now and for the future? Well, let's talk about 3 marks of a revived post-COVID church. Now, remember the setting of the city of Thessalonica, almost identical in so many ways to our own days. They were isolated and socially distant from many people because of persecution. Paul himself said at least 9 times in this book, "I'm lonely. I'm away from you. I'm not seeing you face to face. I want to be with you. You're my people. You're my church. You're my family." All of this. They were dealing with the racial divisions of Jew versus Gentile, riots in the city. All of this going on. And yet, the church itself was so healthy that they changed their city, and the whole nation of Greece was hearing about it. So there's a lot to learn here for us. Mark number 1 of a revived church in the post-COVID world, it will be indispensable to the life of its members. Indispensable to the life of its members. Now listen, churches that are not indispensable, they're going away. Because now, folks know, well, if I want a sermon fix, I can get that. Probably better than your church. Man, I can listen to anybody, I can watch anybody I want. I can interact with them. Through social media. The music's probably better than your church. I can pick whatever kind of music I want. I can do music from one church and a sermon from another if I want to. The only way they're coming back to your church is if your church itself becomes indispensable in their lives. Cultural Christianity, I believe, has been killed by COVID-19, and that may be the only good death attributed to COVID-19. Those that try online to, quote, go to church when they only need a boost, it's just not going to last because church is not designed to give you a boost. It's designed to be, remember, that unstoppable force of love and mission. So what does Paul say about the church? In verse 17, he says that he and his few friends were torn away from the church. And by the way, Paul sent Timothy, his friend, back to Thessalonica to check on him. And the best knowledge we have, he was all alone in Corinth when he wrote this letter, isolated from those he loves. And when he says he was torn away from them in the ESV translation, torn away literally means orphaned. Anywhere else in the Bible, in the New Testament, where you see the word orphan, comes from this word. Paul says, I feel like I've been torn away from my family. Let me ask you a really honest question. Unless you're one of the rare churches that continued to meet during COVID, if your church stopped meeting, as most did you feel spiritually orphaned by not being able to meet? Think about it just a moment. If not, either your church didn't mean what it should have to you, or you didn't mean what you should have to your church. Could be both. There is no positive picture in the Bible of a Christian alone. Not for any long length of time. Get alone, meditate, sure. But living your life as a Christian alone, occasionally behind a computer screen, doesn't work, won't last. There'll be some cultural Christians that'll take cultural Christianity into their homes, and Christmas and Easter every now and then. They'll say, hey, we ought to take a look at, remember that church we used to attend? Let's take a look here and see, we're having some problems in our family. Maybe we should watch the screen for a while. Doesn't work. And so you really have to decide right now, what does church mean to you? If it didn't mean to you before what it should have, now you have a chance to restart. Verse 18 is very interesting. Paul says, I've been trying to get to you. I've been trying to get to church, and Satan has hindered me. Before COVID, what did it take to keep you from church? And again, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. You're watching this Bible study. I'm thankful you're doing this. But think about your own life and then think about the lives of others you know. What did it take to keep you from church? A kid's travel game? Grandma comes to town? There's a ball game on? All those things have become pretty much endemic to the life of most churches. A study done by Tom Rainer some time ago found that, it's probably now 20 years ago when Tom found that the average church member came to something at church, participated in something 3 times a week. Maybe it was a Sunday morning, a Sunday night, a Wednesday Bible study, an outreach meeting, a committee meeting. A lot of believers were at church every day for something. But now, before COVID, it was 3 times a month. And churches were wondering why they were declining. And pastors were pulling their hair out going, man, I want to grow. I'm doing the things I've always done. My people come a third of the time they used to. What did it take to keep you from church before COVID? It took Satan to keep Paul from church. Because remember what we talked about early in this study? We're to be immersed immersed in Jesus. That's what it means to be a follower of Christ. And the church is His bride. So, more important question than the question of the past, what will church mean to your life from this point forward? That's something you can do something about. That's a question you can answer in a new way now. In verse 19 and 20, Paul said that the church was his crown of glory. The word crown was really the Olympic medal of that day. If you won the gold medal, they put a crown on your head. Paul said, the church to me is like winning a gold medal. Being with the church is the life of Jesus shared with others. Think about that. The life of Jesus shared with others. How does that compare to what the church has meant to you in the past? This is what we must do as we restart churches. We must become the kind of church that Paul said, if I can't be there, it's going to take Satan to stop me. Number two, second mark of a revived church in the post-COVID world, it will exist to help you feed others, not to feed yourself. The single worst thing that a pastor ever hears is, I'm just not being fed. Oh, I lost track of the number of times I heard that in almost 4 decades as a pastor. And it's interesting, people say it and they're well-meaning. I just don't like the sermons. I'm not being fed. I'm not being fed. And it's like volunteering the fact that I am a spiritual child and I need somebody to bring me a bottle or a spoon full of food. The truth is the American church became obese because we have been fed so much. In this day and time, we have to be able to feed ourselves and our families spiritually. Again, right now, revival is taking place in the persecuted church. How in the world could they exist to be fed by others? They often are not even able to be at church. Satan hinders them. So they feed themselves and their families. The Supreme Court has come out with rulings, even in the week that I'm filming this, that don't bode well for the church in America in the days ahead. And it very well may be that we will be in our lifetimes in a position that other countries are in, where it's simply illegal to teach many of the things the Bible teaches. If that's true, who's going to teach your children? Who's going to teach your grandchildren? The revived church in the post-COVID world will be made up of chefs and servers, not binge eaters. Chefs and servers, not binge eaters. We follow Jesus, the great servant. He served at His Last Supper. He washed feet. We follow Jesus as the servant, and we join Him as the chef. We have the privilege, if we will, of creating spiritual meals for others. If we'll do that, God will take care of feeding ourselves. If you're not being fed, we'll help you. That's what we're doing right now. Even if you can never go to church again, if the government said you can't, we can help you. Others can help you. We won't have a problem being fed, but will we feed others? Let me go on now. Let me read chapter 3, verses 1 through 9. Paul says, therefore, when we could bear it no longer, we were willing to be left behind at Athens alone. And we sent Timothy, our brother and co-worker in the gospel of Christ, to establish and exhort you in their faith. So Timothy's already been once to see them, that no one be moved by these afflictions. For you yourselves know we are destined for this. For when we were with you, we kept telling you beforehand that we were to suffer affliction, just as it has come to pass, and just as you know. For this reason, when I could bear it no longer, I sent to learn about your faith, for fear that somehow the tempter had tempted you, and our labor would be in vain. But now that Timothy has come to us from you, and has brought us the good news of your faith and love, and reported that you always remember us kindly and long to see us as we long to see you. For this reason, brothers, in all our distress and affliction, we have been comforted about you through your faith. For now we live, if you are standing fast in the Lord. For what thanksgiving can we return to God for you, for all the joy that we feel for your sake before our God? Do you see? These verses are a picture of the church encouraging each other as they suffer anything necessary for the sake of the gospel. And always together. They were unwilling to do it apart if they could help it in any way. In verse 3, Paul says they were appointed, they were destined to suffer. Is it all right with us if our suffering of COVID, if the suffering of what's been happening in our nation as we find our way out of the horrors of racism and into gospel unity, will we accept suffering as a tool to take us there if God desires it? When Paul says you were destined for this, it's very interesting. The word destined is translated set in Matthew 5:14 when Jesus said, you're a city on a hill. You're a city set on a hill. We are to be the church, destined, even through suffering, to be set on a hill that others might see and experience the gospel. Verse 6, he talks about good news. The literal translation is gospel news. The church today is, I call it God's special forces to take the hill with the gospel of our day. What do I mean by that? It's easy to complain about the times we live in. Man, I hear people saying, can we just fast forward to the end of 2020? That's a sinful attitude. I've felt it too. Because that's an attitude that says if things are going bad, God can't do anything good. We don't exist as the church to have a spiritual potluck dinner weekly. We exist to take the hill with the gospel. I spent a little bit of time overseeing military chaplaincy for Southern Baptists. I love relationship with some of our special forces men and women. You know what you never hear from a Navy SEAL to his commander? It's cold out here, and it's wet, and I'm really tired, and they're shooting at me. I think I'm going to go home for a rest. You never hear that. Why? They want to be on the front lines. They realize they are the best. They're chosen to be out there. Church, follower of Jesus, you're a chosen one. Embrace it. Rejoice in it. Verse 8, Paul says, now we live if you are standing fast in the Lord. He said, our real life comes when we know the gospel matters in you and it's spreading like a fire. We'll be known and empowered by prayer. That's the third mark of the post-COVID revived church. We will be known and empowered by prayer. Paul says in verse 10, we pray most earnestly, night and day, that we may see you face to face and supply what is lacking in your faith. Paul said, I want to see you, but not just to see you. I want to see you so we can help you, so we can be together and we can take this hill with the gospel of Jesus. Man, the church in America has not been much about prayer. Boy, you want to have a crowd of nobody, announce a prayer meeting in a church in this country. But maybe that's changing. During the midst of COVID, I've been a part of more prayer meetings than I ever have in my life. Most of them online, but it's been powerful. But that's been happening already in most of the world where the church is growing. A good friend of mine called me last year and said, hey, I'm in Korea. Would you pray for me? I've been asked to address a prayer meeting this morning. It was a Tuesday morning there. And I said, oh, is it in somebody's house? And he laughed and he said, no, there's 20,000 people here. They meet every week to pray in the morning before work. 20,000. If we will be a people who pray like that, God will move. He will move. And we can finish the task together that God has given us before He comes again. About a year ago, before COVID, I saw the church. I wish I could say I see it a lot in this country. I'm starting to see it more, but I see it when I go to the persecuted church. I was in the Muslim world, and a group of missionaries asked us if we would be interested in worshiping with them in the normal way they do church. So we gathered in a home. There was no preschool ministry or children's ministry. They took turns taking care of the children. We gathered in their living room with the missionaries, a few friends, and then some Muslim converts who had come to Jesus recently. And the first thing we did is we sang. But as we sang, some of the songs caused us to weep, and they would stop. And they would share with each other their pain. They would cry together, and then they would pray together. Has that ever happened in your church? In the middle of a song, you just stopped to minister to each other because You were so real in your community. Don't you long for that? That's what the church needs to become. If you're wondering, that's what it looks like. And then as we finished singing, they said, now let's put the names on the screen. They typed names in, and they came up on a television screen of the lost people we're actively sharing our faith with. I don't know. Maybe there were 20 people in the room. There were more than 50 names on the screen. And then they cried out to God, oh, God, please don't let Muhammad go to hell. God, please don't let Aaliyah live all of her life and never meet you. They cried out to God for the lost. Then they put names on the screen of those they were discipling, and they prayed for them. Then they opened the Word, and they shared it, and then they shared testimony. And one of the Muslim converts said, please pray for me because my family has rejected me. He said with tears in his eyes, but this is my family now. And then they said, and now let's go be the church. Let's go and share with those and serve those who we're sharing the gospel with. And they got up and they left. And I thought, now I've been to church. And that's what the church in America can become now if we will. We can restart. Fight for it. Create it in your small group. Do whatever it takes to be in that kind of church, because neither the gates of hell or the crisis of COVID can stand before that church. And if you'll say yes to that church, God will say yes to you. And He'll bring you into that kind of fellowship. That's what He does, and that's what we're after.